Hey everybody, welcome to the Ronline Report. Great guest today, and I have to thank Giles Thomas and Rosie Rascal Hart for arranging this and also giving me some great questions, Giles. This is Patrick Tuor, noted professional bodybuilder and much more noted contest prep coach, joining us from Rome, Italy. Is that right, Patrick?
Exactly.
Okay. I've heard about you for years now, but I didn't know much about you, and today I want to change that. I want to teach everyone, learn a lot about you today. So, you grew up in Switzerland, correct?
I grew up and I live in Switzerland right now. We're just in Rome because my fiance has her family there, so that's why we went down there.
Okay. So tell me about yourself as a kid. Were you into sports? Were you into other things? What kind of kid were you?
Well, my first love is, which it still is ice hockey.
Okay.
I started to play ice hockey here in Lugano. Unfortunately, my mother could not take me to practice every day because we had some 20 miles to go. So I had to change, start playing basketball, and I ended up being a professional basketball player. I played 4 years NCAA,
Wow.
and then had a contract in Italy, the A League in Italy, which is the best league in Italy. But unfortunately, my last year in college, I really loved the weightlifting because I was really skinny. They called me chicken legs, so it kind of made me mad. So I guess I tried the weight room to fix that problem, and I actually loved the weight room more than the game itself of basketball, which I still love. But
Yeah.
and from there on, I started to came back to Europe, didn't play anymore, and started to compete as a bodybuilder. That's back in 1993. So, and then took me 6 years to turn pro, and competed a couple of years as a pro. But I quickly realized I didn't have the genetic makeup to really be successful as a professional. So I quit professional bodybuilding and became coach
Okay.
because I love the sport. So
Let me back up because how can I ask how tall you are? If you were playing
I'm
basketball.
6 foot. 6 foot.
Oh, you're 6 foot. Okay, because I was going to say it's
I
hard
was
to.
I,
Yeah.
I was a point guard, shooting guard. So,
Okay.
but as you know, in modern basketball, 6 foot white point guard doesn't go very far.
I mean, Phil Heath was. I think he a point guard too, but I mean,
Yeah, he probably was. Yeah,
he's 5'9" on a good day. And
yeah.
okay, so when you started weight training and took it more seriously, about how long was it before you saw your results were better than the average guy in the weight room?
Well, it actually came pretty quick because I was very lucky that the gym I trained here in Lugano, or in Lugano, Switzerland,
Yeah.
had this old competitive bodybuilder which took me under his wing, and he quickly put me on a good route. So about 8 months after I started bodybuilding, I competed at the Novice Swiss Championships and I won.
Oh wow!
So for me, that was good motivation and a sign that maybe I had what it took to be a good bodybuilder.
Now, Giles said you turned pro very young. How old were you?
27.
27. Okay, I mean, bodybuilding that is very young.
Yeah, back in the days, it was a little more difficult to turn pro.
Oh, it was.
As you know, in the 90s, it was a little it was more work, and there were few competitions where you actually could turn pro, and so turning pro at 27, being European,
Yeah.
was a pretty good thing back then.
I mean, it was much. It's always been. It was always hard in the U.S., but even harder. I mean, there were guys that were European champions that couldn't get their pro card. So, what contest eventually did you earn your pro card at?
Well, we had to go through Swiss championships, European championships, and world championships. So I had to go all through that in order to get the pro card.
I'm trying to find this question because I know you competed against really like the best. You competed against Jay, Ronnie. Who were some of the other guys you got to compete against in your?
I mean, that's a pretty funny story because I turned pro in 1999.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, I decided to step in my first pro show and made a really bad choice. Really bad choice. Because back then, that was year 2000, they had the San Marino World Pro Cup, Joe Weider World Pro Cup
Yeah.
in San Marino, and was just right after the Mr. Olympia. And everybody was there. So Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, Marcus Rule, Dennis James, and on, all the top, 5, 6 guys back in the days.
Wow.
And I don't know what went through my mind, but I decided to step in that show. And it was really funny because I was number 5. I remember like it was yesterday. And Ronnie Coleman was number 4.
Oh, no.
So, and there, yeah, imagine this. So there was these little steps going into stage, and I was standing, underneath Ronnie, watching his hams, glutes go up that stairs. And I was like, telling myself, what the hell am I doing here? I need to go back in the gym and get some work done. That really woke me up and made me realize what, top level pro bodybuilding really is all about.
So that meant you had to pose right after Ronnie posed, correct?
Yeah.
Yikes. Talk about a tough act to follow.
And I really thought people were screaming for me, but they were still screaming for Ronnie.
Oh my goodness. But wow. So, Giles also said you were accruing some injuries. You were getting your body was getting banged up in that time. What kind of I love talking about injuries. It's like I know I shouldn't, but because I'm all banged up. What kind of issues were you having?
Well, if you remember the 90s, that was the Dorian Yates area, and back in the days, how would we train? It was if you would use a machine, you would be a pussy.
That's right.
So it was free weights, and the machines are just for,
finishing touch.
other people. Yeah. Exactly. So, and it was heavy, balls to the walls, heavy duty, like Dorian would do, but because we all looked up to him as an example back in the 90s. So the heavier, the better. And that's all I would try to do is get stronger and stronger and stronger. And as you know, when you're trying to go on that route, injuries eventually come. And I probably could not tell you one muscle group I did not tear.
Wow.
So I had tears in probably everything besides my right chest. Probably I tore everything. So that I learned my lesson.
Now you obviously so much more now, and you've developed your own training system that we're going to talk about later. But if you could go back in time to back then, what would you have done differently with your training so that maybe your body wouldn't have been so damaged?
Well, you have to learn that there are other parameters to, growing muscle, to protein synthesis, to just heavy training. You need that heavy training because if you don't get strong, it's very difficult to get big. But there are so many other parameters that you can incorporate into your training that are also important in order to minimize the amount of total weight that you have to lift. Yeah. But, to go back to your question, to be really, really honest with you, I would not change anything. The smart answer would be, I would change my training because, the injuries, but I loved it. The feeling that you get from heavy squats, deadlifts, it's just amazing. You feel like a superhuman, being. And those feelings, I don't want to lose them. I went through it, I made mistakes, but to be honest with you, I loved it, Okay.
Now, this is kind of random, but we were talking the other day trying to set this interview up, and I had technical problems, but you told me there's 4 languages spoken in just Switzerland alone. I know you speak several languages. Which languages do you speak?
Well, I speak French, Italian, German, English, and English is probably my worst one.
Wow.
And
you're doing a great job.
Thank you. And the 4th language is called Romansh, which my father speaks. Yeah. I perfectly understand it, but I have a little difficulty speaking it. So we have these 4 languages. We have 3 geographic areas, French, German, and South, the Italian part. And if you want to live in Switzerland, it's a good thing if you know all 3 of them because you travel 100 miles and you have another language. So you better know how to talk.
So has that really come in handy with you working with different athletes to be able to, you must have guys all over Europe that you can speak their language.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you grow up speaking different languages, it makes it easier to learn a new languages. And even with languages like Portuguese, because I've been often in Brazil, which have a common, they come from Latin, it's much, much easier to pick them up. So I have, an easier task than someone who would only grow up with one language. So that really helps, especially working with people all over the world. Having first English is the most important one, but I work with German, with French athletes, and if you know their language, and it helps, especially because there are ways of saying things, of telling things that you cannot translate. So when you talk with somebody like in French and you know how to talk when you want to get a message across, it makes it easier if you know the language itself. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if this is your worst language, English, wow, I'm pretty impressed because you must speak kick-ass German and French and these other languages, I'll say.
Yeah, German, it's High German and Swiss German, which is different. It's like a dialect, and I speak both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a dope. I didn't even know what language they spoke in your country. But
well, that's not the worst question I get. The worst question I got in the U.S. was like, do you sleep on beds, or do you eat with forks, or some things like that?
I've been guilty of stupid assumptions like that myself. But yeah, I figured you guys have beds and cars and electricity and running water, right? So.
And many people they don't know the difference between Sweden and Switzerland.
Right.
We're some miles apart. You know, Sweden is northern Europe and we're in the central south part. So, but most people don't know the difference.
I mean, you're the southern border is Italy, right, for Switzerland?
Exactly. I live just 15 miles from Italy.
Oh, okay. So Giles let me know. I got to give credit to Giles for he came up with pretty much all the questions today. Thank you, Giles. So you worked with a very well-known contest prep coach when you were a pro, and I don't think we should say his name, but he commented that he wanted you to use certain doses of gear that you were not comfortable with, and you literally took half of what he told you to take. Do you see a lot of coaches, even high-level coaches, being, I don't want to say irresponsible, but overzealous with the doses that they prescribe to people?
Well, that's a difficult topic to address, but I'm trying to be honest, and I really think that in today's bodybuilding, we are pushing the envelope too far, and not because we see better results, but because we don't know better. So I think that people should learn a little bit more about anabolic steroids, and be aware that you don't actually need so much. You see it when you start with very little. You have great results.
Right.
Now, the trick is, how can I keep getting results and not increasing these doses so much? Actually, that's a very difficult job because first thing, you have to go off gear in order to reestablish, sensitivity for your body. And second thing is, as a coach, it's much, much harder to work that way, because your clients want results fast, more, and if you want to work that way, you're going to have to take time to analyze things a little more properly and to learn individually about every steroids, the combinations, and really find out every person how much they need. And what I see today is that we just have these cycles and these dosages which are common, and everybody does them. But if you look individually, the needs of every person is very different. So I think we should take a little more time to analyze things a little bit better and not just go with more in order to be sure that everything is working.
Have you had like opposition with some clients where you tell them this is probably, I want you to try this amount, and they say, no, I want to use twice that amount or 3 times that amount, and you have to sort of argue them down to more reasonable amounts?
It happened, yeah. I mean, over the past 20 years, I've worked with many clients, and the biggest problem is when you have a client who has done certain dosages and maybe also had some success, and then he comes to you and says, look, I want to improve. So the first thing you have to do is, okay, you want to improve, but we cannot do more. So the first thing you have to do is go off. And that's where I have the most difficulty is, trying to convince people to say, okay, let's take a break. And that's where the psychological factor comes in. And most guys cannot accept the fact of, losing some weight, feeling a little human again. And in order to be able to restart, to reset, to a certain degree, the clock. That's where I had the most trouble with. Not really people telling me they want to take more, but when they have used more, coming back is very, very difficult.
Right. And I mean, if you have somebody that's been using for 10, maybe 20 years, I mean, they're always going to have to be on a small amount, like what we call TRT amount, I would think, regardless, because their bodies, it's shut down. Like, I admit it because I'm 48 years old. I've been doing it myself many years. I need TRT or else. My body's not going to ever make that again, no matter what I do. So
I'm doing exactly the same thing. I've been on it for 20 years, 18 years.
yeah.
And if I try to go without, I mean, psychologically and metabolically, you're just not, where you need to be. So absolutely, yes, I agree with you.
Okay, so that's enough about gear. We're going to move on. How did you get into coaching? I know you started coaching back when you were still competing, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's also a funny story. When I started competing, I had a very good training partner. He was a little more advanced than me, but he was pushing really, really hard in the gym. And he was really, balls to the walls, hardcore, just do it, don't ask questions type of guy. Yeah. And I'm the total opposite. I need to understand everything that I'm doing. I need to know why I'm eating a certain food at a certain time and taking a certain type of gear. Yeah. And I started really, getting all the information that I could from right and left and trying to find out what I was doing. And he saw that. So at one point in time, he said, look, why don't you tell me what I need to do? So I said, why not? So we prepped for the same competition, and I prepped him, and he actually ended up beating me in the open class. Oh, no. I won the novice, but in the open class, yeah, he beat me, but I was coaching him. And that's when I realized that maybe I was a better coach than I was an athlete. And then you know how it goes. You start coaching one person, other right. people get notice of it, and then from then on was just like an avalanche. And I kept doing it.
Now, you talked before about how you realized, you didn't have the genetics to be a great pro. And that's something not many people have the ability to do, is look at themselves objectively like that. So, how did you come to that conclusion? What did you see with your physique that made you say, I probably shouldn't bother doing this for the rest of my life or for the next 10 years or so, because I'm never going to beat the Ronnie Colemans, the Jay Cutlers, the Kevin Levronis that are out there right now? What did you see in your physique?
Well, I think that's probably one of the most difficult tasks for a bodybuilder, is to really realize objectively how good he can be or he is. Yeah. And that's where most of the guys don't want to listen to the answer. They're afraid to look in the mirror and to really accept their limits. I was 32 when I decided to quit, competing at a pro level. But I had been working out for 8-9 years. I didn't skip a meal. I didn't skip a training session. I did everything I could. I put everything on the line. Even with my studies, I pushed them up almost 4 years out in order to be able to compete. And when you are a rational thinking person, you look at yourself. You know what you've been doing. You know what other people have been doing in order to get where they are. And you realize, hey, I'm just as good as a trainer. As an athlete in the gym. I'm just as disciplined. I have access to the same gear. At one point in time, you have to realize that maybe your mom and your dad did not, put in the work that they needed to do in order for you to be a successful bodybuilder. And
that's funny.
And
I blame my parents all the time.
Yeah. I blame them. I wasn't 7 feet tall when I played ball, and I blamed them, didn't put enough muscle fibers in my body in a bodybuild. But thank God they gave me a brain which works halfway good. So, and I realized, look, I competed with the best. I had an extremely professional coach at that level, and the results were not there like we expected. I was okay. I could make a top 10 in a pro show, but that's not why I wanted to compete. I never competed just for fun. It costs so much money. You lose so much of your personal life. Right. And if you realize that it's not taking you anywhere financially and health-wise, then take a break, Slow down, look in the mirror, see where you are, and be honest to yourself. You can still keep, lifting weights and be in good shape, but you don't have to step on a pro stage. And that's what I did.
So how soon did you know that you were a really good coach, that you were exceptional at it, and that you could eventually really make a living at it?
Well, I think in 1999, when I coached a guy who won the overall title, European Championships, yeah. And we have been working together for about 2-3 years, and he came from nowhere, and won the overall title. And I think that's when I realized that I probably was able to help people more than myself.
Yeah.
And one thing that I always believed in is rational thinking. You know, bodybuilding has nothing to do with rationality.
That's right.
With common sense, with good sense.
Yeah.
Okay, we can work with that. We know we have all this bigorexia, or call it whatever you want, and it's great. I mean, it's our passion. We love it. We do it. But you have to understand that's not the reality. That's not real life. That's just somebody you step into, and you become this human being with, you know, this great amount of muscle, but that's not reality. That's just temporary. It will disappear. And what I try to, you know, talk to the guys that I help is when they want this. I mean, I'm not forcing into this, but when we talk, I say, look, do all you can, but don't take, you know, compromises. Don't do things that you are going to regret. And I realize today that more and more people and athletes are getting smarter. Back in the 90s, it was just crazy. Early 2000s, people would do anything just to get big, you know. And thank God today there's many coaches out there who start thinking and thinking long term, you know, especially I work with many young guys, you know, 19, 20 when they start with bodybuilding. And if you put them on the right path from there, I think that's a great, you know, contribution you can do for bodybuilding is help them think. Don't just tell them what to do, but, you know, put something in their mind which they can rationally be able to think themselves and know if it's right or wrong. And I think that what makes a good coach today.
I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, all coaches are not created equal. And I don't know what it's like over in Europe, but over here in the U.S., everybody and their grandmother is a prep coach now. Everybody. Like you have 19, 20-year-old kids who do one contest, and now all of a sudden they're a coach. And I don't think all of them are as responsible as you are, as knowledgeable, obviously, or experienced as you are. You know, do you see a real issue with that worldwide, or just in our industry, that the coaching industry has gotten so huge that everybody wants to be a coach, and we have a lot of really questionable coaches now, people calling themselves coaches?
Well, I think that's not just the U.S. problem. That's worldwide.
Okay.
Then again, I don't know if you can call it a problem. That's just the way the world is going today, especially with the internet, with the social media. If you are lucky enough that your training partner has great genetics and you help him and he wins a show, gets his pro card, you're famous the next day.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, you know, that really doesn't say that you are a good coach. When you've done it 100 times and over again, then maybe, okay, you should get the respect that you deserve. But unfortunately, when you have genetics, or fortunately, depends point of view, if you have the genetics, you have access to gear, you train somewhat good, you eat clean, you know you can get that pro card and you can have success. Is the coach responsible for that? Not always.
Yeah.
So as you can see, getting famous or getting out there on the Instagram and Facebook is an easy task. To prove it over and over, that's something else. So, but an athlete should be smart enough to look at the curriculum the trainer has and see for how long and how good he has been doing things before he decides to put his health on the line. That's what I think.
Okay, so you're not only well known for being a coach, but you developed a training system. I first heard about it a few years ago from Hide Yamagishi, who was doing it at the time. It's SST Training, which stands for Sarcoplasm Stimulating Training, correct?
Sarcoplasmic stimulating training, yes.
So can you tell me how you developed that? You know, what were the influences, or what were some of the things that you decided needed to change about other styles of training to make this something that's more effective?
Well, the first thing I would like to correct you on is it's not a style or a system.
Okay.
It's just a philosophy. Philosophy, what does philosophy mean? It's way of thinking. It means it's just the way you have to think about your training. So the first important factor is weight. I mean, you have to use a certain amount of weight, heavy weight. You have to be strong in order to improve. But we all know that at a certain point, it's very difficult to get stronger. I mean, when you've reached a certain level of strength, which, you know, comes pretty quickly in your early, you know, lifting years, after 4, 5, 6 years, you're maxed out if you train heavy. So what can you do in your training if weight is limited? I mean, when you're benching, 500 pounds, if you go up to 510, you're not going to have a bigger chest. That 10 pounds is such a small percentage, which is not going to make your chest bigger. You're going to have more protein synthesis because you bench 10 pounds heavier. But it's an amazing improvement over 500 pounds.
Sure.
Injuries, structural limitations. So if weight is a barrier, we need to incorporate inside our training other parameters which can not make us particularly stronger, but who can increase our muscle size. That's when we start to talk about sarcoplasm, because myofibrillar, the myofibers, are directly related to how much weight you use. That's, normal anabolic reaction, myofibrillar training, heavy training, but that's limited, again, to the weight that you use. So there is another portion of our muscle, which is the reticulum sarcoplasmaticum, the sarcoplasmic, I don't know how you call it in English. I mean, the sarcoplasma is around our muscle fibers,
right,
which retains a lot of fluid, a lot of substrates, like phosphate substrates, and that's where we can keep growing, keep putting more nutrients in our muscle, keep hydrating it better, which in turn will also have a better effect on our myofibrillar hypertrophy. And that's more metabolic work. We need to increase the time under tension that we have in our training, and we need to increase the training intensity, and we need to change type of contraction that we do in order for that part to do empty in order to have a greater supercompensation effect. So that's actually the biggest difference between powerlifters and bodybuilders, is why do bodybuilders, they're not as strong, but they are bigger muscle. Both take gear, both take a lot of calories, but why do bodybuilders grow more? Because our training is a little different. And that's exactly that portion that we need to analyze in order to make our training more efficient. So this philosophy of sarcoplasmic stimulating training is trying to use all possible variables that we can inside our training to make a training more efficient. To empty, I mean, I have to explain something very shortly, which actually would take a long time. You have to imagine this: action equals reaction equals action. Action equals reaction. So if you hit your muscle in a certain way, you're going to have a response from your muscle. Okay, you train heavy, you're going to get that response. So if added to the heavy training, you add another variable, which is intensity, time under tension, and this is very, very intense and strong, the greater the response is going to be. We have to empty our sarcoplasm in order to have a greater compensation effect. So I developed different variables or different ways of training, but they have to be personally adapted. I mean, everybody has to do it differently in order to go from a heavy, set, increasing the time under tension, have no ATP resynthesis, which is very important in order to empty. So you cannot have breaks. You cannot take a minute break. Otherwise, your body resynthesizes ATP and energy comes back. So how to really squeeze everything out of your sarcoplasm, starting from a heavy weight, in order to have a greater compensation effect. That's, in 2 minutes, explained the sarcoplasmic stimulating training.
Okay. So where can people look? Do you have a website or something where people can or how can people contact? Because I'm sure some people are going to want to know a lot more about it, and they're going to bother me. So where can they go?
Actually, I've decided not to do anything. I started to write a book about it, and I quit. I wanted to do a website, and I quit because it's extremely personal. Everybody has to adapt their training to their own needs. Every muscle group needs another type of stimulation. You can't do for your biceps what you're doing for your legs. The muscle fiber structure is different, and you need another type of work. So it's very, very difficult to explain. That's why I do seminars. I've done seminars in all over the world, from Brazil to Dubai. I've been everywhere doing these seminars. But there I have a direct contact to people. I can answer to questions, and I have 2 days to really explain it. It's not easy to understand. That's why a lot of bodybuilders I work with actually don't want to do SST, because it takes time to analyze things. It takes time to structure a training because it's not so easy. And unfortunately, most bodybuilders, I don't know for which reason, they're not very analytical. They just like to do things and take things and,
Just tell me what to do. Tell me what to take.
Exactly. So, but I do seminars all over the world. I've done more than probably 50 seminars, and that's when I really have the chance to talk, to interact with the people. If I started to do some videos on YouTube and stuff, but people think that that's what it is.
Right.
I show them a set, and then they say, oh, that's SST. I say, no, that's just a little example.
Yeah.
That's just an example of how you can structure a particular set on a bench press or on a squat, but that's not SST. That's just an example. And to explain the philosophy behind it, it's very difficult. And I don't want to make a commercial.
Right.
I'm not going to make millions out of it. I don't care. But I know that the people who have worked with it for years, who are working with it now, they're getting great results from it, and that's the most important thing.
I mean, it's to your credit that you can get people to stay at a seminar for 2 days and listen to technical discussions like this, because people don't have attention spans anymore, like you were saying. They want to watch a 2-minute video. They want to read a paragraph like this long and say, okay, this is what I need to do. All right, I'm good. So clearly your system has a lot of merit if you're able to sell out. I've seen the pictures on Facebook, packed halls in places like Brazil and Italy, all over the world where you're doing these. So clearly SST, it's very effective, or else you wouldn't be selling out these seminars. Right.
Bodybuilding can be seen 2 different ways. You can see bodybuilding as something very simple, which it can be. Train hard, eat good, take your gear, you're fine. Yeah. Or you can try to understand what you're doing, which becomes a little more complicated. It's like if you would ask me ask a heart surgeon, hey, can you show me how you do this? For him, he learned it. He understands all the process. It's easy. He does it routinely. But can he explain it to you in order that you can do it afterwards? That's another ballgame. And if you really want to understand muscle hypertrophy, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, protein synthesis, it's actually not as easy as people make it to be. You have to be able to understand certain things, learn certain things. And once you really get the inside of what's happening inside your muscle, your metabolism, your training, then you really can go forward. But if you don't have that knowledge, it's very difficult to, step over that heart and do the surgery. I can just show you, the set you have to do, but if you're not understanding all the processes that are behind, it's very difficult. That's why through a seminar, which usually are anywhere from 8 to 12 hours, wow. I'm not pretending everybody understands, because, when I look at their faces, most of the time they're like, what the hell? But, at least I have them thinking, and that's the most important thing. Is I tell everybody in seminars, when you go out of here, I'm not pretending that you know what's in my head, but I pretend to give you some tools in order to be able to think about your next training and structure maybe a little bit differently. And if I'm able to do that, I'm already very happy.
Okay. So you've been in the sport a long time now, relatively speaking. What do you see the direction of physiques? Are you happy with the way the winning physiques have evolved over the years, or do you think things were better in the 90s, or are you happier with classic in that direction? Everyone's got different opinions on what the best type of physique is. What do you stand? What do you look for in a winning physique?
Well, it's probably the same question if you would ask me, you prefer bananas, apple, oranges. They're all good fruits, and, right. And if you ask 3 people will give you different answers. I like the way our sport is going today because of these different categories that we have. I like the fact that we have classic physique. I'm talking about man bodybuilding. Yeah. I really love that class because I think it brings back a more not just only aesthetic, but a more reasonable look to bodybuilding. If you look at the 90s, early 2000s, the direction the bodies were going, I don't know if that's the bodybuilding that I would want to see today, because besides what you have to do in order to be that way, it's just freaky. I mean, people like the freaks. Okay, that's good for them. But I think it's good to give bodybuilding a direction where you say, hey, it's not just about how much muscle you have, but how aesthetic that looks. Small waist, round muscle bellies, good condition. So I'm absolutely happy with the fact that the Pro League put in the classical physique, put in the men's physique and bodybuilding, because that gives opportunity for different ways of seeing bodybuilding to compete. You maybe don't want to, go through certain processes in order to become a professional heavyweight bodybuilder. Yeah. You have another opportunity. You have men's physique. I really don't like the shorts in men's physique, to be honest with you.
No, you mean the board shorts?
That really bothers me. Yeah. But I think they should be able to show their legs, just be little downsides from classical. But I mean, I don't think anybody can say that modern bodybuilding, these classes are negative for the sport. They bring more people to the sport. They give more opportunities for people to compete at a high level. So for me, it's absolutely positive. More choice, the better.
Okay. So everybody knows how Neil Hill found Flex Lewis when he was very young and started working him into a championship status. Similar story with you, and I believe he's from Switzerland, Nicholas
Volyou.
How do you pronounce it?
Volyou.
So how did you start working with him? Because he's someone I see being one of the better guys in the next few years.
Well, I became I want to believe, and that's what he tells me, like a second father for him. Because first of all, when I lived in the French part of Switzerland for 14 years, where I had my gym, we were really close, so we would see each other almost on a daily basis. And we really, got a great bond, together, because he's an amazing, not just athlete, but person. Very, very loyal, hardworking, and I've rarely seen somebody like that in bodybuilding. He came to me in 2012. I remember this little kid with his skateboard in front of my gym. He came with his mother, actually, and said, yeah, look, I want to become a bodybuilder. And believe me, I looked at him, and at that point, nobody saw his potential. Wow. He just had some good legs, and his upper body looked extremely weird. I mean, long, so no arms, and you could not see anything out of that at that point in time. But I said, okay, let's do, a show. We did the European Championships. We did it completely drug-free. And I put him through that test. I said, look, we're doing this. And after this show, if you're still standing, if you're still wanting to continue, then we'll really do things, the way it should be done. He did everything to the letter. We went there drug-free. He looked good. Didn't place in the finals, but after the show, he came to me immediately and said, so what's next? And that's when I understood that, maybe this kid has something special. And ever since, he has been putting so much work, so much dedication. And if you look at him today, I can truly say if we, bring it on point on game day, he's going to be very, very difficult to beat.
Yeah. Can you set the record straight about last year at the Charlotte Pro? People were talking about something with his shoulders. A lot of posts online. So what was going on, and what was the real story?
Well, people were telling that we put Synthol and oil in it, and I've never, encouraged anybody to use any side enhancement. Everybody who asks me, I'm totally against that. I've tried it myself back in the 90s with that pump and pose. You probably remember. Sure. Dr. Clark's pump and pose. I've tried it myself. I've seen, what really shit that does to your body and how it looks. And ever since, I've been totally against it. Coming back to your question, what happened is probably a couple of years ago, we don't know exactly when, he did an injection in his shoulder, which was not absorbed very well. And it just caused this fibrosis. I mean, we went to the doctor, we did scans, how you say, IRM?
Like MRI? Yeah.
MRI. Mm-hmm. And it's a fibrosis because the oil actually was never really absorbed, so encapsulated it and then became a fibrosis. And over the last 2 years, he increased so much muscle mass, the fibrosis migrated to the external. It doesn't migrate internally, it migrates externally. That's what the doctor explained to us. And that's what he had. I mean, nothing more.
Yeah.
Ever since last year, we have done deep tissue massage. We've done some other type of therapies. We didn't get surgery done. We talked to a surgeon, we said it could be done, but you know, the scar tissue and everything. And if you look at him today, it's almost invisible because we really worked on it and pushed it back. Fibrosis is still there if you really push in it, because this tissue does not reabsorb.
Right.
But you know, it's almost not noticeable anymore. But it's just an old fibrosis, nothing more.
Yeah,
And if you look,
I find it odd that people talk so much crap, because so many people out there don't even compete. They're shooting up their shoulders every day, or a couple times a week anyway. And just the odds are a lot of them are going to have the same issue sooner or later, because you know, things don't get absorbed and scar tissue builds up, and you know.
And the problem is that it was on his outer side, upper outer lat, you know, delt, which is, it's really stupid. When you stick it out, it just gives you this little bump, you know.
Right.
And if you see it, it wasn't on one side of his body. The other side was almost invisible. He had nothing there. Yeah. So if you would do, you know, side enhancement, we'd probably do both sides.
Sure.
And another thing is, Nick's shoulders have always been his strongest point besides his legs. Yeah. So why in the hell would we put anything in there? Right. But, you know, people like to talk shit, and when you're good, people are going to, you know, shoot crap at you, and we're going to have to live with it. Yeah. We're just going to show up this July and show everybody that we're wrong.
So what's his next show?
There is a pro show in Portugal in July, beginning of July.
Yeah. And
that's what we're prepping for right now.
Okay. Get him over to the U.S. for a show. Come on.
We went to the U.S. last year in Charlotte, yeah. And you know, take advantage of the fact that it's actually only a 2-hour flight, and expenses are a little less, so why not take advantage of it?
That's true.
But he's going to be back in the U.S., promise.
Okay. Right on. Yeah, I mean, Giles, I think, made a point. You know, a lot of these European athletes, they spend a lot of money to come over and compete in the U.S., and sometimes if they don't get a good look, it's discouraging that they, you know, maybe they even flew a bunch of their family out to see them and stuff, and to get looked at for 5 minutes. I can understand why they'd rather pick a show over in Europe. I would too.
If you have the opportunity, yeah. And you know, it's not just the expenses, it's also you have different time zones, so you have 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours, you know, time difference. Right. And when you travel, you have to be there probably 5, 6 days in advance if you really want to let your body get accustomed to the new time zone. And that takes more money, and you know, bringing all the food and finding cooking facilities, it just makes it more stressful. So if you have the opportunity to do it close, you know, to home, sure, take advantage of it.
Now, Giles said that at certain points you've worked with up to 150 athletes at a time. Is that right? Wow.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Well, I don't do anything else from, you know, from morning until I go to bed. That's all I have is my iPad, my iPhone, and I answer to messages. And I think, I mean, I didn't start with so many athletes. I started with 4 or 5, and you work your way up. Right. But I think if you know what you're doing, if you have this, I don't know what you would call it, talent or feeling for it, yeah, you know what the answer is when the question gets, you know, to you. When you know what to do, you see a picture, you know what he's been eating, you know what he's been taking. If you have to think about it, there's something wrong with you as a coach. You know what to do. So sometimes I talk to athletes, sometimes it takes a process, learning process longer, but I think, again, if you are good at your job, you can handle that. Right now, I'm not coaching so many. I cut back a lot over the past 2 years, so I'm probably more around 75 to 80 athletes,
That's
something like that.
Still a lot of clients. That's a lot. Do you get, how much sleep do you get, especially like around a contest weekend?
Not much.
Yeah,
not much.
Wow. So
not much.
Here's a good question. Here's a question. What is your favorite part of coaching athletes, and what's the most challenging part?
My favorite part is seeing athletes reach their goals, helping people become better and getting results. When you see somebody happy, when you see somebody thanking you, when you see somebody, you know, sending you a present because they're happy with what they're doing, that's the greatest satisfaction for a coach. Besides, sometimes you have the satisfaction you didn't even win the show. You know, it happened to me lately with a very young kid from Argentina, who I believe is an extremely great talent. And he placed third at the Arnold Classic, the junior class, and he got third in the open class. But the improvements we made were just fantastic, even from one show to the other. So when I saw his face, when I saw how happy he was, when I saw that this kid realized the progress he made, that just, you know, just makes your day. That just makes you happy. The most difficult part is, frustrating part is loyalty. Is understanding that there is a process you have to go through in order to become a mature, experienced, good bodybuilder. And when I work with young talents, I have had one, I'm not going to make any names, which made an incredible progress. He was even, you know, newcomer of the year in the pro league and everything. And then you see him change coach because he thinks that he can, you know, do it faster or whatever he thinks. That's disappointing, especially because you have done everything right. You have, you know, put emphasis on certain aspects of the prep, which I know he's not putting anymore. And that's frustrating when you start a work and you're not able to finish it, you know. So that's people jumping around from coaches too much. That's probably the most frustrating thing.
Right. Does it take, you know, it takes more than one show, I would imagine, to really learn someone's body and how they respond to everything. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. And we're talking about young athletes, which are still growing into, you know, being a mature bodybuilder. So that takes even more time. When when you work with somebody who has been doing many pro shows, who has a certain age, you pretty much know, you know, it's just a matter of conditioning, fullness. You can't change so much. But when you have young athletes, you know, they still have 10, 20 pounds to go. That's frustrating when the work gets interrupted there, because it's a learning process which takes sometimes 3, 4 to 5 years, which you have to adapt every time because he's still growing into his, you know, bodybuilding body. So when I'm not able to finish that type of work, that's pretty frustrating.
I can imagine. So I know you're probably not a name dropper, but I'm going to drop some names. This is what I know that who you've worked with. Brendan Ray, correct? Hide Yamagishi, Ronnie Raquel, and I believe Dennis Wolf too, right?
Right.
And there's some other. Who am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing a few bigger names that I would know.
Oh, let's just keep them missing. It's no problem.
No, I know you don't. I know you're not going to brag about it, but I'm just curious. But that's fine if you don't want. Who are you working with now that we don't really know much about that you think has really great potential that we're going to start hearing a lot more about?
Again, I don't want to disrespect, you know, other athletes that I coach by naming somebody in particular.
Yeah.
All I can tell you, and please allow me to answer this way, is I have a lot of young, interesting athletes that structurally and metabolically have the potential to become good, very good bodybuilders. Again, I'm very fortunate to be able to work with people in their early 20s and even before, especially here in Europe. And if they can keep their focus on what they're doing and believe in the project, I'm sure we're going to have a couple of new pros coming in and having an impact. But it's not just a matter of, you know, having the genetics. You also have to have the right mindset and lifestyle in order to become a successful bodybuilder. So that's the most frustrating part also for a coach, is when you have somebody but financially doesn't, you know, isn't able to do what he needs to do, or his mind is just in other things, and that there really I can't do much. You know, I can tell you what to do, but if you're not doing it, that's sometimes frustrating. But again, please forgive me for this, but
Okay.
you know, I really love everybody I work with. I want to see everybody successful, and I don't really like to say this kid is good, this kid is bad, because everybody that's on the team, I really appreciate the fact that they believe in what we're doing. So
Yeah.
if you allow me to,
No, that's great. No, because I mean, I don't know all these young guys you're working with, but like one example at that London show a few weeks ago, I was very impressed with this young Mike Summerfield kid. I'm sure you have others with, you know, similar potential too, but that's just one example of someone. You know, if he keeps doing what he's doing, he's going to be really good. Well, yeah, like you said, I agree. I don't think it's fair to single anyone out because someone else might think, oh, come on, he doesn't think I'm that good. But
And believe me, that happens, Ron.
oh, I'm
Believe me.
sure. I'm sure. We all have egos, you know. Tell me a little bit about, she's a big star on the MD site, Rosie Rascal Hart. How did you start working with Rosie? I know you helped her finally get her pro card and took her to her first Olympia, her first pro win. So how'd that all come about?
Well, I was friends with Giles through the internet. I mean, we never met each other, but through the internet,
Yeah.
Giles, he's an expert. He knows everything about everybody. He's just amazing. I mean, and he's so knowledgeable about the sport too. I mean, Giles can, he picks you apart like nobody else. He has seen so many shows, has been in this game for so many years. So, really appreciate being friend with Giles. He's the one who called me up and said, look, I have my fiance who might be interested in working with you. And I immediately said, man, for you, I'm doing anything. I mean, he's been on my side. We've been friends. And when I took a look at Rosie, I really saw the potential. I mean, I really saw the structure was great. And if she would just put, the right work in, I knew that she was going to be an extremely good women's physique competitor. And we got a pro card. We got our first pro win. And then she started developing some issues metabolically, not feeling well, stomach, and which was a little bit frustrating. Her body wasn't responding like we wanted to, but it was just very, very great working with her because she's a very smart person, very knowledgeable person, which makes your work not easier but more difficult because we would always confront each other. But it was a pleasure helping them, and I'm always there for them, anything they need.
Yeah. Most coaches would be upset if their client said, I don't want to compete for a while, or maybe never again. And you were very supportive, actually, with her decision. Shows
Absolutely.
That, shows you're not just in this for the fame or the money. You really care deeply about these people. You want what's best for them.
I think if you have competed yourself, if you know what you go through in order to get in shape, you can only be supportive. I mean, the motivation cannot come from the outside. If you don't have that fire inside, that hunger inside, that to put everything on the line, to really go through it every day, I cannot force you to do it. And I don't want to use any Rocky, theme motivational speeches to get you to do it. I mean, that has to come from you.
Right.
I'm only the sauce, on top of the hamburger. I'm not the hamburger. But if there's no hamburger, who is going to eat the sauce? So that's, your stupid way of seeing. And talking to Rosie, she was a little bit frustrated the way things were going in the last prep, and I understand and everything. I was trying to give her a lot of space because I knew she was perfectly clear in her mind what she wanted out of her body. So I left her a little bit alone, and maybe she felt sometimes, a little left alone, but I really wanted her to find her own way in things. Which I think finally she realized. And then when she told me, look, I want to take a break. I mean, she is a great coach. She does so many other things besides bodybuilding. Right. She's one of the funniest women you ever encounter in your life.
I know.
So she has so many things going for her. She doesn't need that. So I can only be supportive.
Right on. Okay, well, Patrick, I thank you so much for your time. And to let everyone know, we tried to do this yesterday and we had technical difficulties. So I appreciate you hanging in there and being patient with me more than you know. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. Patrick, is there any Facebook or Instagram that you'd like people to check out?
Well, if they want to check me out, my Instagram is Tuor, T-U-O-R, and my Facebook is Patrick Tuor. I have two of them. I saw you liked the fan page. I have the other one. Okay. And I also want to take two seconds time to thank you, Ron. I've been following you and muscular development for so many years, and I want to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you also, Giles, for talking to you, introduce me to you, and to all muscular development fans out there. Thank you very much for following this, and keep going.
Cool, man. Thank you so much. For the Ronline Report, it's been Ron Harris with Patrick Tuor. Thanks for watching.